Hello and welcome. Thank you for letting me share my experiences with you in World Coma Day. I happen to be sitting here in beautiful rural Shropshire, only about 15 kilometers from the house where Charles Darwin was born and where he went to school. Anyway, this story happened a long time ago, 47 years ago, when I was a 20-year-old undergraduate medical student in London and a keen amateur musician, as I still am. I had been performing in Benjamin Britten's St. Nicholas Mass in a church in London, and I caught meningococcal meningitis from a flute player sitting in front of me, who was a nasal carrier. Everybody in the choir and audience was later swabbed by public health and discovered several nasal carriers in the vicinity, but I was the only person who got ill. I went to bed early that evening feeling unwell with a feverish flu-like illness and some vomiting and diarrhea. I was discovered unconscious probably about midnight by friends who were concerned about me and called in because they hadn't seen me. I remember nothing of this period except some bright lights, unpleasant motion, some pain, faces, and loud noises. The next thing I remember is floating in a mist, calm, tranquil. Myself, I was aware that it was me. I wasn't sure where I was or what was happening. There was some sense of the passage of time. And I started to hear the most beautiful, entrancing music, somewhat in the style of Bach, choral music, sacred music, but utterly beautiful, like the music of the spheres. I have no idea for how long this persisted, but it was comfortable and benign, and I was happy to go along with it. At times, the music got louder and the mist seemed to be brighter. And I sensed I was approaching some sort of threshold where maybe a decision was needed. I was tempted to give up, let myself sink into this, sort of abandon myself and float off into the mist to wherever it went. But something pulled me back. I was young, very inexperienced. My whole life was before me. I had done or achieved nothing, and I made a conscious decision that I was going to choose life and return from wherever this was. I have no idea. I have no idea how long I persisted drifting along in this state. Apart from the music, I was totally alone. There were no images of any kind. I was unaware of my body. I felt no pain. I saw no beings, entities, heard no voices. I had no perception of the doctors and nurses who must have been treating me. And my only recollection is of feeling tired, as if perhaps I'd had enough of this. But I could have easily relaxed into a peaceful death, I think, and let myself slip away. But some part of me felt I was being presented with an opportunity to come back and lead a life, although I'm not sure I was aware how ill I was, and I had no idea what had happened to me. Although I was hearing almost endless choral music, strangely, I cannot recall hearing any proper words or understanding any text or meaning to what the choral music conveyed. I have no idea how much time I spent in this state, but sometime 24 hours or so later, I surfaced into a state of what I can only describe as altered consciousness. I awoke in a darkened room with a nurse in attendance, feeling pretty dreadful then. but still not scared or frightened. I started having very vivid and prolonged, rather cheerful, euphoric hallucinations. The typical hospital pictures on the walls that are provided by volunteers and the Red Cross came to life. The figures in them emerged from the frame as fully formed shapes, came out, sat on the side of the bed and were surrounding me, talking to me, telling jokes, laughing, and sort of interfering with what was going on. So I found it very hard to listen to the nurses or doctors that attended, pay any attention to them, because I was being distracted by the interruptions of these clownish figures leaping around my bed. In one of the figures, there were donkeys and animals. They came to life as well and were in the room with me. So it was quite a cheerful menagerie sitting there. That lasted for a couple of days, I think, until eventually 6 days later, I was deemed well enough to leave the sort of intensive care high dependency unit and return to a normal medical ward. As I gradually improved, the figures interfered less. They stayed within the picture until I was alone, and only then would they come out to bother me. And eventually they spent longer and longer within the frame of the picture, but would still occasionally wink at me, wave a hand or smile or make some snide comment, until eventually they stayed exactly where they were, and I returned with increasing horror to full normal consciousness. It was only when these hallucinations ceased that I appreciated the gravity of my situation and the magnitude of the uphill task I would have to recover. I was very weak and had multiple cranial nerve deficits, most of which recovered, but some of which have persisted. And it took me about 6 months to get anything like normal function again. What kept me going during this pretty dreadful period was the determination to live life to the full and achieve my potential, having been given a second chance to live. It gave me the resolution, optimism, and determination to keep going during a very, very difficult period. And I did improve and eventually managed to scrape through my medical degree and qualify as a doctor after many tribulations. Having come back from the brink, I had a lust for life and was grateful to be alive. Throughout the rest of my life, I have tried my best to live up to this and to maximize my opportunities and live as fully as possible. I hope that I've managed to do this and will continue to do for the rest of the time available to me. Well, I think that's all I can honestly and realistically say about events that happened so long ago. Thank you and goodbye.
Hello, I am a postdoctoral researcher working on the fascinating phenomenon of near-death experience at the Coma Science Group in Belgium. After having heard the intriguing experience of Mr. Crispleton, I will here provide a short overview of the current literature about near-death experience. So following a coma, some people may report no memory at all, or on the contrary, they can recall some memory, some specific memory. For most of them, this memory contains extraordinary experience, such as having the sensation of leaving his body or the vision of a bright light. These episodes are known as near-death experience. Near-death experiences are subjective experiences that typically occur to people close to death or in a life-threatening situation, such as coma or cardiac arrest. People may experience several prototypical features such as out-of-body experience, experiencing a deep feeling of peacefulness, entering a tunnel, and seeing a bright light. In 1975, the terminology of near-death experience was first introduced into the English language by Dr. Raymond Moody after having collected over 150 coma survivor reports. This was actually the first evidence of near-death experience during comatose state, setting the stage for a new paradigm for studying the neural basis of consciousness in unresponsive state. Since then, scientific investigation of the phenomenon has accelerated over the past decade, in part because of the improvement of resuscitation technique. As a consequence, these non-ordinary states of consciousness have been increasingly reported, with an incidence estimated around 5% in the general population. And today, accounts of near-death experience after a coma have been collected from all parts of the world, spanning many centuries and various cultural areas. To facilitate empirical research and reproducibility among researchers, we currently use the Near-Death Experience Content Scale, which is a validated, standardized scale permitting to identify near-death experience. The self-report questionnaire contains 20 items used to quantify the richness of the experience. A particularity of this near-death experience are the strong impression of reality. Indeed, people often report that what they experienced was actual real-life-based event. However, we may rather regard the near-death experience as internal awareness with a disconnection from the environment, corresponding to what we call a state of disconnected consciousness, like when we dream during sleep. So people are in a coma, so they are not awake, eyes closed, and unresponsive. And they mentally experience a rich subjective experience, usually without the perception of the environment. This strong impression of reality often leads people who experience a near-death experience to interpret their experience as a proof of life after life. This is highly interesting, and this is their own opinion. However, this is worth nothing that people who experience a near-death experience were actually not dead. Some of them were in a state of clinical death. However, it is important to note the difference between brain death and clinical death. Brain death is the irreversible cessation of all function of the entire brain, while clinical death is the reversible cessation of blood circulation and breathing. So people who reported a near-death experience are people who were in this state of clinical death, they recover, and they were then able to recall the near-death experience memory. Another characteristic of near-death experience is that they are challenging for research because indeed they rely on the subjective nature of experience. Indeed, researchers are not present when people experience a near-death experience, and they are necessarily relying on indirect measure of experience, that is, personal account collected afterwards. In addition, we still don't know exactly when the person will experience the near-death experience. It could be when falling into a coma, during the coma period, or upon awakening. Nevertheless, subjective experience reproduced in laboratory experiments that closely resemble near-death experience can be induced by different methods, such as psychedelic substance, immersive virtual reality, hypnosis, or syncope. Reproducing near-death-like experience in laboratory setting permit to go beyond previous limitations inherent in near-death experience research and to test the current neurobiological hypothesis by objectively mapping brain change. This actually permits to identify some underlying mechanisms. You may see here an illustration of neurophysiological mechanisms that may be involved in the emergence of near-death experience. Research has shown that near-death experience may be caused by several non-mutually exclusive factors, such as a physiological stress, including disturbed level of blood gases, naturally occurring release of endogenous neurotransmitter, including endogenous NMDA antagonism and endorphin, may occur as another factor. Both may contribute to dysfunction of some brain regions, such as the medial temporal lobe, the temporoparietal junction, or the anterior insular cortex. Near-death experience may therefore result from these neurophysiological mechanisms or their interaction, but the exact causal relationships of the different factors remain difficult to determine so far. Near-death experiences are therefore not fiction or a myth. They exist, they are subjective experiences that humans may experience in some specific context. While the debate about the authenticity of near-death experience is now closed, it remains nevertheless difficult to draw a comprehensive picture of the exact state of consciousness and the neural correlate associated with this experience. I am nevertheless optimistic that science could one day explain in a precise manner the phenomenon. I would like to thank you very much, and I would like to take this opportunity of this World Coma Day to do a witness call. If you have experienced a near-death experience and you would like to share it as Mr. Crispleton did today, please don't hesitate to contact us at this email address. Thank you very much.
Hello, my name is Daniel Konciela. I'm a neurologist in Copenhagen, Denmark, and it is my pleasure to show you some research on the evolutionary origin of near-death experiences. Near-death experiences occur in life-threatening or not life-threatening situations, and they have entered various branches of the human culture, including religion to the left, the visual arts in the middle, and the literature to the right. Near-death experiences are associated with various phenomena, including meeting spirits, angels, or deceased loved ones, entering some other unearthly world, getting to a point of no return, leaving one's physical body, which is termed an out-of-body experience, entering a tunnel or a gate of bright light, becoming one with the universe, a sensation of joy and peace, and life reviews. This slide shows a biological framework of near-death experiences, or NDEs. One of the first things to know about NDEs is that 50% of them occur in life-threatening situations and 50% in non-life-threatening situations, and that the semiology is identical. In other words, from the narrative of the NDE itself, one cannot tell if it occurred in a truly dangerous situation or not. This suggests that also the brain mechanisms behind these experiences probably are similar, if not identical. Second, in any case, a near-death experience requires the presence of a functioning brain. Without a functioning brain, it would be impossible to make an experience with so many delicate details, store it in the memory, retrieve it many, many years later, and report on it in an eloquent manner. Some say that near-death experiences are proof that conscious experiences can be made in the absence of a functioning brain. But the more parsimonious explanation is that this experience is made just prior to the loss of consciousness. Third, there are several predisposing brain mechanisms that increase the likelihood of having an NDE. For example, people with a tendency of REM sleep intrusion into wakefulness and people with migraine aura are more likely to have had an NDE with an odds ratio of 2 to 3. Also, glutamate hypofunction and several other mechanisms probably play a role. All this leads to a stress diathesis model of near-death experiences, which postulates that NDEs probably can occur in all of us, but some of us are more likely to have them because of certain predisposing brain mechanisms. This is certainly not the final word, but for a neurologist like me, this is starting to make good sense. Thus, from a neuroscientific perspective, the most interesting question is not how near-death experiences occur in the brain, but why. Why do they occur, and what is their meaning? One of the most interesting aspects of near-death experiences is their universality. These experiences are known from all over the world, various times, and many civilizations. This universality indicates that near-death experiences may have a biological origin and a biological purpose. So, what could this biological purpose be? Well, here is a famous quote from an equally famous evolutionary biologist, Theodosius Dobzhansky, who said that nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. I repeat, nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. So, our question here is there a candidate mechanism in the animal kingdom that could be the evolutionary origin of near-death experiences in humans? When attacked by a predator, as a last resort, animals can feign death to improve their chances of survival. This phenomenon is termed Thanatosis, also known as death feigning or tonic immobility. Thanatosis occurs in a large variety of taxa, including insects, reptiles, and mammals. In humans, it has been described as a defense mechanism happening during sexual assault. Thus, Thanatosis is an anti-predator strategy that is part of an innate defense cascade, which is activated when fight or flight are no longer possible. It involves sudden onset of immobility, with or without loss of tonic muscular activity and unresponsiveness to external stimuli, but preserved awareness. Here you see an artist's impression of a video from the African savannah, which is available via YouTube, featuring a cheetah, a hyena, and an impala, illustrating the survival advantage of tonic immobility. The cheetah brings down an impala that lies apparently dead on the ground. A hyena comes and takes over the prey. The hyena examines the impala and bites it a few times, which is not shown here, but in the video, while the cheetah watches from a distance. Confident that the impala is dead, the hyena chases the cheetah away, while the impala uses its chance to escape. So, could Thanatosis be the evolutionary origin of near-death experiences in humans? Following a pre-registered protocol, we investigated the hypothesis that thanatosis, or death feigning, is the evolutionary origin of near-death experiences. We first showed that thanatosis is a highly preserved survival strategy, occurring at all major nodes in a cladogram ranging from insects to humans. We then showed that thanatosis is a survival strategy in humans irrespective of cultural backgrounds and ethnicity, allowing, for example, some people to survive atrocities such as the mass execution in the Budapest ghetto during the Holocaust, or more recently during the Orlando nightclub shooting in the USA. In addition, using data from the Liège Coma Science Group Near-Death Experience database, we showed that humans under attack by other humans, or modern predators such as cars and traffic accidents, can have near-death experiences. Finally, we showed that humans under attack by big animals, such as lions in these two examples, can experience both thanatosis and near-death experiences, and we showed that the phenomenology and the effects overlap. Thus, above, an example of thanatosis. The lion shook me as a terror dog does a rat. The shock produced a stupor similar to that which seems to be felt by a mouse after the first shake of the cat. It caused a sort of dreaminess in which there was neither sense of pain nor feeling of terror, although quite conscious of all that was happening. It was like what patients under the influence of chloroform describe, who see all the operation but feel not the knife. This annihilated fear and allowed no sense of horror. And below, a near-death experience from a similar situation. A lioness attacked me. I lost all consciousness. While I was in this unconscious state, I went through the most beautiful, blissful experience. I saw things about me and my family. I saw my future, like my brother with 3 baby girls pleading with me for help. I saw my entire life. I went to this amazing, beautiful place. Some call it heaven, some call it God, some call it hallucinating. All I know is that this is where everyone truly belongs. It is where the soul goes. I wanted to stay, but then this blissful place in which I was in closed. It was like a portal with all the colors you can imagine, and it closed. In summary, we have built a line of evidence suggesting that thanatosis is the evolutionary foundation of near-death experiences, and that their shared biological purpose is the benefit of survival. The question remains why near-death experiences also occur in situations without predators, such as with resuscitation during cardiac arrest. Some authors say that also in these situations there might be a survival value of near-death experiences, but to be honest, I doubt that. In contrast, I think that the survival benefit of near-death experiences is limited to the very few predatory situations, and that near-death experiences in non-predatory situations no longer have such purpose. This is not so counterintuitive as it may sound. Indeed, humans have many behaviors which are evolutionarily highly preserved, but whose benefits are restricted to certain situations. Examples include yawning and laughing when being tickled. Evolutionary biologists think that mammals, including humans, evolved laughing in response to tickling to signal submission to an attacker or to foster parent-child interactions. And yawning can be useful in synchronizing the behavior of a social group, for example, to get members of a herd to sleep at the same time. While the benefit of yawning for humans seems obvious during childhood, for example, parents are triggered to put their baby to sleep, adults often suppress the urge to yawn given its negative social stigma. For example, yawning during a conversation with a boss is unlikely to give you the pay rise you are hoping for. Similarly, most adults perceive the urge to laugh when tickled as a nuisance. In the same vein, we think that the cerebral mechanisms behind near-death experiences have evolved from thanatosis because they offer a survival benefit during predatory attacks. After all, if an event is not survived, it was not a near-death experience. But this pertains only to a minority of life-threatening situations. Since humans no longer have natural enemies, in most life-threatening situations, or those that are perceived as such, near-death experiences are unlikely to have a specific biological purpose. Finally, we propose that the acquisition of language enabled humans to transform these events from relatively stereotyped death feigning under predatory attacks into the rich perceptions that form near-death experiences and extend to non-predatory situations. I thank you very much for your attention. Please do not hesitate to contact me if you have questions. Take care and bye for now.